on our side.
For now.
Godzilla is an almost 400-foot tall, nearly 100,000-ton reptilian bipedal creature. He is a force of nature, and it's bad enough that he's so big and powerful, but he also has ridiculous defense. He also has regenerative abilities, and it takes a lot to bring this guy down, and even hurt him. Conventional weapons don't really work on him, and he feeds on nuclear radiation, and also produces it by way of his bionuclear circulatory system. He can spew atomic breath and is basically a walking, breathing nuclear reactor. Godzilla is well known as the atom bomb manifested. It is extremely hard to kill him, and he'll probably go on living forever. Within every film, Godzilla seems to have different depictions, even within the MonsterVerse films. But someone asked a very interesting question. If MonsterVerse Godzilla were to travel and appear inside the Boys universe, where Homelander and A-Train and other supes exist, what would be the outcome? How would the people in this universe react to his existence? What would this mean for the superheroes and the villains? If Godzilla were to exist in the universe of the Boys, it would undoubtedly bring unprecedented chaos and destruction. Godzilla is a massive, powerful creature with destructive capabilities that could easily rival or surpass many superpowered beings, possibly most of them. The Boys universe is known for its gritty and realistic take on superheroes, depicting them as flawed and sometimes corrupt individuals. Vought International, the American multi-billion-dollar superhero entertainment conglomerate, would definitely want to get their hands on Godzilla, a monster that cannot be tamed and will not take too kindly to that. At the time of this video, Homelander is at the head of this company, and he's also one of the most powerful superheroes in the Boys. Despite being a knockoff Superman, he would face significant challenges dealing with Godzilla. Homelander possesses super strength, flight, and heat vision, an ability able to cut through most things and melt metal. But Godzilla's sheer size, durability, and his atomic breath could pose a serious threat. While Homelander is powerful, Godzilla's resilience and devastating attacks might make him a formidable opponent. I mean, this dude blasted a hole towards the core of the Earth. Homelander is much faster than Godzilla, and probably would be able to punch him around a bit.
Damn!
MonsterVerse Godzilla is also very intelligent, so he wouldn't give up and would try to figure out how to get around this. We can see him strategizing in Godzilla 2014 with the male Muto. But there's also one significant issue that Homelander would have to face, and that is Godzilla's ionizing radiation. In The Boys, the show takes a unique approach to superhero abilities and weaknesses. Now, we know that ionizing radiation affects Superman, and Homelander is somewhat based on Superman. We know that conventional weapons don't work against him, as they don't work against Superman, but what about nuclear weapons? If ionizing radiation affects Homelander similarly to how it affects Superman, it could be a potential weakness for him. However, Godzilla would have to be able to hit Homelander with his atomic breath. We've seen in Godzilla vs. Kong when Godzilla was trying his hardest to hit Kong with his atomic breath, despite Kong being almost as big as Godzilla. Godzilla was having a hard time hitting him. Imagine how much harder it would be to hit a much smaller target that can move very fast, can fly, and doesn't get tired. Godzilla would have to pull an Omni-Man and guess where Homelander is going to be. Godzilla is intelligent, but I doubt he's smarter than Homelander. In this hypothetical situation, Godzilla would face an opponent unlike any he has encountered before. He would likely find it challenging to comprehend what is happening because as far as he's concerned, human beings don't possess superpowers. And you gotta wonder, do you see how territorial Godzilla is? Past this fight, he would probably see human beings as a threat. I mean, Homelander's not the only superpowered person in the Boys universe. The world set in the Boys is filled with supes or superpowered beings, and now Godzilla has a legitimate reason why he must now unleash on all of humanity. Because humans having superpowers would threaten the balance that he's used to keeping, especially if these humans fail to bow down to him. I think with enough time, as much as it pains me to say this, if Homelander could avoid being hit by Godzilla's atomic breath, Homelander would annoy Godzilla. I think at first, during this fight, Godzilla, like with most of his opponents, would see him as a nuisance. Since he's so small, he'd probably thinking it's a weapon made by the humans again.
Son of a bitch!
I mean, as seen in that clip, we see Godzilla shy away from some of the human's firepower on the bridge. He obviously still feels it, and it's probably more of a stinging mosquito sensation or a bee sting. However, Homelander's hits would be very powerful, and he would be very fast, and Godzilla probably wouldn't even be able to see him at first. The minute Homelander were to slow down or hover in a spot, Godzilla, to his horror, would realize that this is something that looks like a human, but exerting the power of a kaiju. Godzilla would then probably recognize it to be a threat, and thus recognizing the humans as a threat overall. If Godzilla could not hit Homelander, who would be lasering him and punching him, and Godzilla would be getting annoyed or hurt to the point where it was fruitless, he would probably head back to the water to go recoup, and Homelander would probably see this as a win, because his main thing would be to protect the people because he still wants the people to love him. It's possible the other superpowered individuals would probably join forces to assist Homelander in this scenario. Oh, and God help everybody if Soldier Boy were to be there. It's not just that it would spell trouble for Homelander, not because of the potential danger to Homelander himself, but due to Godzilla's ability to absorb power, specifically radiation. Soldier Boy's primary power involves emitting a stream or a huge pulse of ionizing radiation, which he might unleash against Godzilla, unaware that it would only make Godzilla more powerful. Let's say in this hypothetical scenario, if Godzilla retreats to the ocean, whether or not people discover the existence of a hollow earth is uncertain. The key takeaway is the realization that colossal titans exist. Godzilla, however, would have another ace up his sleeve. Throughout history, every single time Godzilla has faced defeat or was ill-equipped for a battle, he returned more evolved and adapted to the challenge. So it's quite possible that the next time Godzilla reemerges, he would be much faster or he would have a much simpler solution to the problem. Godzilla would encounter Homelander again, and Homelander, feeling confident, might believe all he needs to do is wear down the colossal creature as he did before. However, Homelander, being intelligent, would likely sense that something is different about Godzilla. His heightened powers would enable him to recognize the creature as the same, but with noticeable variations. If Homelander is astute and cautious, as he tends to be, Homelander would likely leave the area and communicate that there's something amiss. Homelander loves to be adored, but he also has high self-preservation despite how strong he is. If Homelander were to persist in fighting Godzilla, he would find out very quickly why that would be a very bad idea in probably his last action. See, Godzilla recognizes that he can't outmaneuver Homelander with speed alone. It's impossible. So Godzilla would employ the same strategy as he did in Godzilla King of the Monsters. He would unleash an area of effect flash nuclear pulse, radiating outward and incinerating everything within its proximity. Even a creature with potent regenerative abilities, like Ghidorah, was entirely obliterated by this overwhelming power. Homelander would meet a similar fate in this scenario. While it's conceivable that with divine intervention or the assistance of other superheroes, they might eventually learn that removing oxygen is the key to defeating Godzilla, this knowledge might not be apparent at this point. But I assume nuclear weapons would be on the table as a possible weakness for Homelander. I mean, he is so much weaker in comparison to Superman, especially if you were to put the two against each other toe-to-toe. What's not certain in the on-screen show Universe for the Boys is whether or not Homelander is impervious to nuclear weapons as well, the way that we've seen Superman is. If people were to use nuclear weapons on Homelander, they would also be putting themselves in danger as well. But let's just say that ionizing radiation would hurt him. And I'm assuming it would because we saw how terrified Homelander was when Soldier Boy held him down and was about to emit his own ionizing radiation power upon Homelander. Homelander thought or knew he was going to die. Keeping that in mind, Homelander would be dead if Godzilla used this move. I'm sure that eventually human beings would quickly figure out that Godzilla breathes underwater and most likely lives underwater, and that he goes somewhere where they're not able to track his motion anymore. Now, being a superpowered person has a purpose, which is to keep the world safe from kaiju. And they would need to, because Godzilla would most certainly turn on the human race. And this would open up people's curiosity about Earth and where all the other monsters are if they find out there are others. This is the worst possible thing that could happen. Because you see, at the moment, Godzilla perceives the humans as annoying ants. At the most anyway. And people want to believe that he cares about humanity. And the truth is, he doesn't. We get a good glimpse of this within the Godzilla vs. Kong movie when he starts laying waste to everyone because he knows the humans are responsible for hiding an element of Ghidorah. Look how big of a threat that was to him, and he didn't even know exactly what it was the humans were doing. He just knew they were behind it and he was detecting Ghidorah's energy or his consciousness. Godzilla falls in such a bad mood whenever he perceives a threat, and if humans just so happen to be in the way, then well, too bad. can see these clips of Godzilla versus Kong. If the humans are aligned or associated with a perceived threat, he will kill them or stomp through them to get to it. We see the same thing happen in the earlier portion of Godzilla versus Kong, where he killed all those people and had no problem cutting straight through their boats. He specifically had a vendetta against the humans because they brought Kong right into his territory and saw it as a threat. So we've already observed in universe, at least in the monsterverse, that Godzilla will chop asses in three when it comes to the humans, if they become a threat to him in any way, shape, or form. How do you think he's gonna take it when a bunch of the humans themselves have superpowers that are a threat to him and the balance of his kingdom? Godzilla will annihilate every human being until either superheroes are not a thing anymore, or until all humanity is dead, and it wouldn't be hard. If it's an even bigger threat than he expected, I'm sure as an alpha titan just like Ghidorah, he might even call upon the other titans to help. Now, I don't see our Godzilla doing that, but he could if he wanted to. If humans and superpowered people were smart, they would stand down, but that would mean that if any ships or vehicles pass through areas that Godzilla would perceive as his territory, he would have a problem with this. He would now be monitoring everything the humans are doing, and if he even perceives something remotely as being a threat, such as a superpowered person being on the beach enjoying themselves and using their powers, this might trigger an attack. At this point, Vought or other organizations would quickly try to figure out a way to kill Godzilla. Maybe a special superpowered person who can remove oxygen from the air or employ some other tactic would be used, or they would combine their powers to take care of a threat. Even if they were to kill Godzilla, they would still have to get the other kaiju too. We already know that there are kaiju out there that are potentially stronger than Godzilla, and with Godzilla already protecting the planet, who's to say that a bigger, badder version of Ghidorah won't come to this planet in Godzilla's absence and lay waste to it? We have nothing protecting us from the other kaiju that are sleeping that would all emerge due to the imbalance or the lack of someone keeping them at bay. Now, all of this is under the assumption that in the boys' universe, there's a possibility of a Hollow Earth too, or as they'd call it in Monarch Legacy of Monsters, the Axis Mundi. And this is under the assumption that this and the Hollow Earth is something that exists across all planes. Let's say that a portal to the Hollow Earth did not exist in the boys' universe either. Then it would be hard for Godzilla to just disappear into an area where people can't track him. He could still utilize his power to kill Homelander, if he ever gets the chance to, that is. I think because of the events in Godzilla King of the Monsters movie and the scenario that was already presented, Godzilla would still possess the ability to nuclear pulse. If he's extremely angry, he wouldn't need to charge it up so much or for so long. He'd have a chance if he could admit it much faster. Homelander was almost destroyed by Soldier Boy, and what saved his life ultimately is the fact that Soldier Boy had to charge up his atomic beam. Homelander would recognize this and have time to escape Godzilla. So Godzilla would have to make it instantaneous considering how fast Homelander is, if he can even do that. Fighting kaiju that cannot move quickly, Godzilla never had to worry about charging up his power, but with Homelander, he does. In a scenario where it would take too long for Godzilla to charge up, I think Godzilla would just amp up the potency of his power, which would kill much of humanity. They would try and probably fail to evacuate enough people and would have to end up cutting off a section of the city to drop a nuclear bomb on the area, which would make Godzilla even more powerful and thus allow him to exercise the power at a much faster rate, which would kill Homelander and a significant portion of humanity. So in this scenario, I'm not saying that Homelander or other superpowered beings couldn't hurt Godzilla. They definitely could, but there's specific cases for this, and they all involve being impervious to radiation. There would need to be a being that has the ability to suck all the oxygen from out of Godzilla's system or drain his power, like the parasitic Mutu Primes have the ability to, as was seen in the graphic novel. But humans in general would not have a nice time. Now, if Homelander could get to Godzilla and throw him into outer space and send him hurling many, many kilometers and miles away, Godzilla would just be in space floating forever, and the threat against humanity would be neutralized, unless an alien brings him back to Earth or they use him as a weapon against humanity. If not affected by radiation, Homelander would be able to just toss him into outer space if he could lift him. Or the other scenario, and this really depends on the superpower that you can think of, the superhumans, that would be a lot of help to the situation, are those like Ant-Man that have the ability to grow very large. You know where I'm going with this. If they were going to use a type of soup to defeat Godzilla, that would be the way to do it. Somebody would climb up on Godzilla like they're playing Shadow of the Colossus, and they would have to enter him. Providing its internuclear hostile biology doesn't kill them, all they would have to do is grow super small and then super big and much larger than Godzilla, or at least larger than his heart or head, and explode from the inside. I don't know if Godzilla dies, if there'll be a nuclear fallout or something, but this is definitely one of the easier ways to kill Godzilla without having to throw him into space, and I can see the boys doing something like this and Godzilla wouldn't even feel it coming. It would be very sad, but I think using this method with a superhuman that has his power would definitely defeat him, and they've already done this in the boys plenty of times when it comes to other humans. Again, this is only considering that the person with this power is not affected by nuclear radiation, because even if they were to go in wearing a suit with their small size, they would still have to burst out when growing larger, so even if the person ends up dying as a result, they would still end up killing Godzilla, which is a win for humanity. So if we're just considering Godzilla going up against someone like Homelander, then Godzilla would probably win if Homelander can't throw him out in space and is not affected by radiation. But if you consider how greedy the boys' universe is and the slew of powers that they have at their disposal, I think in general, if Godzilla were to head inside the boys' universe, somebody with some superpower would end up killing him, but not before he does a lot of damage. Thanks so much for watching. This has been Ultiori. You ask, we answer.